Cool. So looks like everything works, and we may proceed with the presentation devoted to the phenomenon of the community engineering. And the slide says that it's going to be presented by Maxi Katerenko, but like I'm not him, and he's not me, and I'm Igor Miniailo. I'm lead architect of Magento, who made actually presentation about the service isolation an hour ago, and unfortunately Max was not able to join us today, so I'm substituting him. So this is back to my statement that Magento should be, in Magento we should provide replaceable architecture, so you see that architecture is definitely replaceable. So the architect may effectively substitute the director of engineering. So let's proceed to the topic. So Magento community engineering. So this is particularly technical track, and from the very beginning of the yesterday, on this track we are talking about how Magento is dominating on the market, what particular API we provide, how we differ from other platforms, what abilities we provide for better integration with ERP system, with CRM. We define how we supposed to react on the always changing market, how we supposed to provide the PWA compatibility, and so on and so forth. So a lot of technical tracks are being discussed here in this particular room, and actually all around the conference. But the real thing, how Magento differs from our main competitors, is Magento community. Actually, that's you. So this is a presentation literally about you guys, about system integrators, about independent community contributors, about extension developers. So all the entire environment of those who make contribution to Magento and make it as a stunning platform to be. Because the Magento community is the most valuable asset of the whole Magento infrastructure. And just to make a short story behind, so 2 years ago, it was so the team with the name of community engineering was formed, and the main task for that team, the main responsibility was the team was to facilitate communication and collaboration with community contributors, to make it possible easily accept community contribution and make it part of the Magento core, because before that, of course, Magento was an open source. Of course, Magento was accessible on GitHub, but that the previous time, before 2017, the open source status of Magento could be considered just as it was able to download the source code of Magento free of charge in internet. So that was the way how Magento was an open source before 2017. And since that time, because we didn't have the particular responsible party inside of Magento to facilitate work with you guys, with those who would like to make a valuable contribution into Magento core code. So that even the pull requests which were created for Magento, they may still even for years in an open state, and nobody actually handled them properly. So this was decided to address since 2017, and since 2017 we formed a team which was led by Maxi Katerenko, who is currently absent, and there were 4 developers there. So actually I was one of those developers, so I was just one of the, I was from the beginning a part of that team. Then the team started to expand, and at this moment we already have more than 4 guys, and we already have the guys responsible for different part of communication, different part of collaboration, for MFTF testing, for different projects, so on and so forth. But at that time there were just four developers responsible for everything. And even in that year, you can see that we processed more than 2,000 pull requests. We got more than, we dealt with more than 5,000 different contributors. So that time we organized a Slack channel, we started to communicate, we started to visit more often and more frequently such conferences like this one. We started to participate, we started to ask people to pay attention on our activity, and we started to react on most of the requests coming from your side. So that you may see that the gradual growth in 2018, so the number of the pull requests increased like 3 times in comparison with 2017, and the number of contributors also gradually growing. So that you can see also the current statistic year today in 2019, so that you see that all this vibe around Magento and how this vibe end up with some valuable code contribution. So actually we're talking here about in particularly code contribution. So the way how different developers who are working with Magento for example, stacking with and facing some bugs, issue. I know that this not really often happen because Magento is almost perfect, as we already figured out on our previous presentation. But still, there are some chances that you will face some bug from the Magento side, and you will. So you may effectively deliver the fix to Magento, and actually, this is the responsibility of the team. So in 2019, we just to show the steady growth of the community, in 2019 we got additional 450 community contributors who made their first pull request to Magento code base. So this is just an enormous number, and this is just to show how we are expanding, how we as a platform expanding every day, every month, every year. And here actually our heroes, we have so that system was established pretty much 2 years ago. So we introduced like 2 different roles. The contributors, because we are always talking about the scalability, and actually that was my technical presentation an hour ago. So I was talking about the technical scalability. And actually this is human resources scalability. So that we, at some point of time, when we got a massive number of pull requests coming to the Magento code base, we realized that we are not able to process them as a team of 4, because our capabilities, our time, and our resources are really limited. So that while the number of community contributors were steadily growing, we realized that we need to introduce a role of Magento maintainers. So maintainers of Magento, actually those guys who took our responsibility, who took our permissions, who took our authority and started to organize and help the engineers making the pull request to Magento to make it in a more efficient way. So because in a Magento community, we have quite a lot of really experienced guys, and many of those are currently attending this presentation, and they are wearing these stylish hoodies, like Yise, for example, in the first row. And these guys actually helping us to facilitate how actually the process of maintaining existing pull requests happen. So currently we have 35 community maintainers, and you can see these brave heroes, all of these brave heroes on this slide. Also, pretty much recently we introduced the Magento quality maintainers role. So those guys who will help us to organize an effective way to triage, to validate problems, bugs, and fixes in Magento code base. Because some of these scenarios are really complicated. Some of the scenarios require some complex infrastructure need to be deployed, and this requires quite a lot of Magento domain knowledge. So that we introduce this role as a Magento quality maintainers for those guys who will help us to triage many bugs, and because Magento provides always infinite number of different business cases need to be replicated to make sure that the product works as expected. And sometimes even Magento internal developers don't exactly know whether the particular components work correctly or no. So we're still expanding, especially we're still looking for especially those guys. And if you wish to join and to become a Magento quality maintainer, just don't hesitate to drop a message on engcom@adobe.com, and our guys will talk to you and provide more details how you can step into this role. So here you may see the partners contribution program and the list of all partners, all agencies whose developers at least once created the pull request to Magento, and you can see that this list is continuously growing as well, and we have already like more than 100 different agencies who contributed code to Magento. From the Magento standpoint, we always try to make this collaboration as a win-win collaboration. And this is actually why, because while developers making code contribution to Magento, we are educating them to write code correctly. Because especially now, now it's time getting better and we already have good documentation. It's actually good documentation for Magento 2.3. We already have the certification for Magento 2.3. But before Magento 2.3.0 was released, there was no certification, there was no lot of guidance for Magento 2, there was not a lot of documentation for Magento 2. So that most of the people got this knowledge how to write Magento 2 code precisely, how to write the Magento 2 code properly based on while working with the community engineering team. Because you probably know that the thing which we typically say for community developers that you are not supposed to look at how the things are implemented in Magento. So the source of truth for Magento is not the code base, is the documentation. Because especially taking into account that we are really strongly support backward compatibility in Magento, what actually means for us? For us it means that and sometimes, not always, but sometimes we end up having some legacy code which is not refactored just to prevent introducing any backward incompatibilities for our key component, which may introduce a lot of impact for extension developers, for system integrators, for all of you. So that, and the number of this legacy code sometimes may be misleading for you, especially for those of you who try to find already typical implementation of particular task in Magento code base and just to copy paste it. So the copy pasting from Magento usually is not a good idea, and the good idea is to read documentation, and if you still have some hesitation regarding a particular way how to implement it, just don't hesitate to drop a question either in community Slack channel or in Twitter, but like community Slack channel actually is created for these purposes. So you may ask a question and you will be, and somebody either from Magento community or from Magento engineering team will answer you, or from the architectural team, because we have a dedicated Slack channel for architectural team as well. So this is how we organized the collaboration. So we started to make an education of community while processing their pull request and while making the code review of their pull request. Because based on our 3 years in a row work with the shoulder to shoulder with community, based on the feedback we are constantly getting from the agencies we are working with, from our partners, that the most valuable stuff provided while contributing from their side is the code review from the Magento side. Because guys from Magento, their code review is like nobody but guys from the Magento will tell you how properly write some especially some code which relies on the new technology, new paradigm, and so on and so forth. So community events, you probably may see, and actually, especially now, we are all attending one of the community event, and we got quite a lot of collaboration with community during this event. There are different recognition beyond introduced from the Magento side, and these recognitions usually at the end of the year we just create a list of the 50 most influential community contributors. We produce some discounts for events like Imagined, and we also support from the side of marketing both individual contributors or partners. So the Contribution Day is a new type of event which was invented back to 2017, where we created a format. So this is not typically a hackathon, because there is because in comparison with a hackathon, the main goal is to make the contribution and to make it valuable and to make it deliverable, so that developer who come to the Contribution Day actually will proceed through all stages, which usually core Magento developers proceeds solving some business task and making the delivery of this task to Magento code base. Because sometimes people just don't realize the whole complexity we have in Magento, the whole procedures which should go through just to make a delivery. Because it's maybe not clear that we have some really strict definition of done, and all the code which is delivered to Magento supposed to satisfy quite a long list of requirements, like it should be solid compatible, it should be covered with different kind of the automation test, it should be object-oriented friendly, and it should follow quite a lot of object-oriented patterns and the best Magento practices, which we also describe on our numerous documentation pages, like definition of done, technical visions, and so on and so forth. So here the developer may get a grasp of experience, and to feel himself like working as a Magento core developer for one day. So we have, along with, because we started from the small, we started to process all the existing pull requests created for Magento to GitHub repository, and while we started to process more and more with handling this pull request, we've got the feedback from community. Some community realized that finally Magento started to collaborate with community. We are pull request processing, and the number of pull requests beyond created to Magento GitHub repository grown drastically. And so that we decided why not to try, if we already accept the bug fixes, why not to try to implement some big features. And that was really enthusiastic assumption at that point of time, because actually we never expected that it may end up with, for example, building such a big component like Magento inventory, or it's also known as multi-source inventory. So which currently consists of almost 50 different modules, and which is currently, if I'm not wrong, this is almost 1/5, so almost 20% of the whole Magento modules code base. So this is really huge project which was contributed by more than 100 different community developers. Where in the scope of this project, it was created almost more than 1,000 different pull requests. So this is really huge project and initiative. Then, after the multi-source inventory, we started to move the needle with async import project, with GraphQL coverage, with Adobe stock integration, so that such big project, and especially those projects for which sometimes we don't have internal resources, started to be, so the community step in and started to make this code deliverables with us and helping us to make these deliveries. Especially, and sometimes the real motivation of community in this case may be that, not maybe, but that they are relying on some part of functionality which is currently don't exist in Magento, and while working on this functionality by themselves, they decide to make some extension and just provide it to Magento. Because on the long run, it's much, from one side, it's better to get a feedback and to make it bug-free also. But from the long run, if Magento accepts this code contribution, Magento by itself supposed to support this particular module, this particular contribution after it's been accepted. So that many system integrators are interested to make it a delivery for Magento just for the sake of avoiding additional expenses for supporting this component after the release. And actually, that's how some of the functionality started to appear in Magento. And this is how the Magento Community Edition, Magento Open Source started to expand, especially from the feature perspective, and along with that from the quality perspective. Because based on many different researches, the open source code is much more security proof than the closed source, because everybody sees this open source code, and everybody may contribute with even with the security bug fixes. So that for security we have the security bug bounty program, which is not really open, but Adobe appreciate with the security bug fixes even with additional money. So always for us, the main goal as working with the community, one of the main goals, actually two main goals for us were openness and the transparency. And that's why we try to deliver all our internal processes to those who collaborate with us externally, so that we started to provide our internal backlog outside, so that you may see our internal backlog. Moreover, you will impact our internal backlog. We are creating own tickets. So you are helping us to triage this ticket. So triaging ticket is usually supposed to be an internal process where the product owner representing and assigned to particular components made the judgment whether the particular feature proposal or bug fix important enough to be delivered so they're making the ordering of the stories or bug fixes in a way the stories to be delivered in Magento. So that since we started to collaborate with community more deeply, we provided an ability to see our backlog and to impact our backlog. So that, for example, on all the, especially this is really related to all the community projects. So all you may see, for example, for Magento inventory, or for stock integration, you may see the particular order of the stories in a backlog, and you may impact on the order of the stories on a weekly or bi-weekly grooming with the product owners assigned to this particular component. So that we brought all the internal processes outside as well. But that was not all, because Magento has really complex infrastructure, which is usually stays just behind the scenes, and we did not provide the possibility to get access to our internal infrastructure. So that even pull request and even the pull request being handled on a GitHub, we handle it on Travis, for example, while on internally we run all the pull requests initially on Bamboo, but now on Jenkins. So that it was a mismatch. So we were misaligned with the way how community run pull requests. So that we made incredible amount of work just to make this alignment and to provide all possible instruments and all the access to our internal infrastructure to make the scene which stayed behind the scene to be open, honest, and direct with community. So what we did, you can see here that we introduced the possibilities to run. First of all, we started to run all the tests on Jenkins, and we provided the automated tools which help to facilitate the communication process for community contributors. And for us, it's really important because you've seen on one of the first slides I shown that in a 2019 year today, we have 450 new community developers, so that for us, this automated test assistant is really matters. And here you may say typical dialogue between the contributor and between the automated robot from the Magento side. So here is contributor asking Magento to get the deployment of a server based on Magento 2.3 develop branch, and to make this instance available for testing particular issue. So this is the conversation happen in the scope of GitHub issue created for Magento. And here is automatical response where Magento robot via an API deployed the cloud instance of Magento and provided the admin access to this particular instance. And this instance is reachable, if I'm not wrong, for 3 hours, so that during this time, the contributor may to reproduce a bug, and if the bug is not reproducible, the corresponding command gonna be added so it's not able to reproduce it. Or if the bug is reproducible, it would be triage, so the triage will be made by the contributor or maintainer, and verifying that there was possible to reproduce this bug. So internal backlog integration. So I already mentioned that we introduced quite a lot of automated tools, and now just to make the single source of truth, all the tickets and all the pull requests created by community in GitHub automatically transferred for our internal Jira and created as a Jira ticket, just to make sure that we are not losing tickets, we are not losing problems created. So everything is counted and everything is under our investigation, and we are not losing anything. So the live triage, as a triage with product owner. And based on these product owners, we build the public reports where we describe the problems, like found, problems solved, and what problems should be addressed first. And the ecosystem, yeah. So these issues are processed by quality maintainers. So those guys who have good expertise in Magento as a product. Community portal. So this is another probably entry point for both individual contributors and partners, which provide the possibility to get a dashboard, to track the status of either agency by itself or individual contributor statistic, how many pull requests created, how many points achieved, because Magento allocate points for all the delivered pull requests or all the reviewed ticket. This number of the points depends on the complexity of the pull request, depends on the what was particular part of work being done, whether it was a bug fix, whether it's new feature introduced, so on and so forth. And based on this based on this points gain, we are building statistic and the score table where we would like to outline our top performers from Magento community and from Magento partners, so that we provide an access in a community portal for Magento agencies, just to simplify for them managing internal developers who are contributing for Magento, because partners also gaining points, and these points are aggregated all together, so that we build in the statistic based on the partners as well. So here you can see the 2 pages of the community portal, where you can see here are the projects which currently in development, and here you may see the statistic of the Yaroslav Rogaza, who is a community maintainer from Outwix, and you may see on what particular date how many pull requests he he reviewed or he created. So we already mentioned here several times that Magento functional testing framework is not optional anymore, and this is particularly applicable for the thing which we for community contribution as well, because it's very important to write the functional test because currently only functional tests provide an ability to test functionality of Magento independent or totally agnostic on the way how the Magento application is deployed, whether it's whether it's monolithical deployment, whether it's isolated service deployment, whether we will start substituting some particular functionality of Magento with external services or ERP system or product information management system. The functionality and the way how the shopper interacts with the system, it's still the same, and if it's covered with MFTF test, you are as an extension developer or as a system integrator may feel safe that nothing broken if some changes happen to your application. So this is the main goal of the Magento functional test is to provide the confidence for extension developer, for system integrator, that the project may go live to release, because any other type of testing does not provide the confidence whether the product is ready to be released. Unified automated testing, so as I already mentioned, we provide the same approach for both internal pull request and external pull request. Currently, we totally eliminated Travis CI from our infrastructure, and we fully switched to Jenkins. And now we are running all the Jenkins builds, so all the set of builds which we currently running for internal pull request, for external pull request as well. And here, even more, so we started to provide Allure report. So if you've been to Luka's presentation, Lukas described Allure report in more details. So this is really useful stuff, because actually this is Allure report provides you step-by-step execution of functional test, and if there was some problem, it will provide you the screenshot of the particular page where this problem been identified. So here you may see the output for particular pull request, and what different tests are part of. Here's Allure report. Here you may see that something was wrong, and the 42 test was wrong. So this is marketplace, and we want to apply the same infrastructure for marketplace as well. So our global goal here is to run the same set of MFTF tests for all the extensions running on and distributed via the marketplace. So you may see that the number of extensions is constantly growing on our marketplace, and even for the August this year, we got new 68 extensions. So here you may see that, actually this is what I already mentioned, that our main goal is to run MFTF test on all the, so the EQP, this stands for Extension Quality Program. So we really want to run all the MFTF tests through all the extensions which we are running, which we are distributing through Marketplace, because currently, and this will drastically speed up the time how fast the extension is beyond available on a marketplace after it's uploaded, because currently we still proceed with the manual review of this extension, and the manual review always takes some time. But here, introducing the MFTF, we may end up with just automated checks. And this is why MFTF test with extension is totally must for us. And the last but not least, I want to end up my presentation with the thing which I start for. So I mentioned quite a lot of stuff, and we talk about quite a lot of things on a different particular technical tracks here. But I just want to emphasize one more time that the most valuable asset for Magento is Magento community. Thank you very much.